close till I get up. Time is barely on our side. I don't wanna waste what's left. The storms we chase are leading us, and love is all we'll ever trust. Yeah, no, I don't wanna waste what's left. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, and on we'll go.
Hi, guten Tag. Hello. Hi, everyone. Okay, Happy Saturday, everyone. Hopefully, you're all having a lovely, lovely Saturday. Let's see here. Who do we got? Who do we got here today? We got who do we got? We got Matt Guy. Hello, Matt Guy. Boo. Or you say, "Boo." Okay, Ghost, okay. Hello, Doug. Hello, Doug. Okay. Louise. Hello, Louise. Hello, Diego. No, 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 Diego, you're not a bad person. Okay. That's a very complicated issue, but no, that you're not a bad person. Okay. Um, Alyssa. Hello, Alyssa. We also got AMA Gaming. Hello, AMA. Um, I miss anyone? I think I missed a few people. Laws. Hello, Laws. Uh, what else did I miss? Who else did I miss? Okay, 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 okay. That's everyone. Hi, everyone. Hello. So it is Saturday. You gotta love Saturdays. Saturdays are peak peak times. What is this sitting down here? Okay. My gaming controller's kind of falling down. Okay. So we have a few things to talk about. Um right, totally, Doug. I agree, right? We had a great time last night. For those that came to the Robert's here. Hello, Robert. We last night we did a Jester After Dark stream. We basically just listened to music. We had a great time. Thanks to the generous contributions of the folks of the stream before that. And we got some contributions during that second stream, so that was lovely. Okay, so um, I may not be streaming as long today as I normally do, okay? Because my dear mother would like me to go with her to this Japanese festival. So I may, and I will probably maybe only stream for a couple hours. Normally I do like 2.5 hours, so it won't be much shorter than normally is, but just something to think about. It might be a little less than 2 hours, but we will get through it. We have a few things to talk about. First thing is first. If you, we have a 5 super chat goal. Okay, 1 super chat gets the jester hat, 3 gets the collar, and then if we get to 5, I'll do another Jester After Dark stream tonight. Okay, and so if we get to 5, I'm not going to do the makeup again today to spare my face for a little bit. I know, right, Doug? It's shocking. It doesn't feel like it sometimes. Okay. We will, so if we get to 5 super chats, I will do another Jester After Dark stream for Saturday night. Okay. Um, yep, there's that. Also, if you want to, as you know, all folks, as I always have to do my little self promotion here, I'm still getting used to that. In the lower this corner, if you use your phone and use that QR code, you'll be able to send me something through Buy Me a Coffee. That'll count toward, if it's $2 or more, it'll count towards our super chat goal. If you go over onto Twitch, which is thank you, Robert. If you go over to Twitch, which is linked in the pinned chat at the top of the YouTube chat. And if you subscribe there using Amazon Prime or a regular subscription, that'll also count towards the super chat goal. And if you're over on Twitch and you send 200 bits or more, that will get us to closer to the super chat goal. Thank you very much. Is that Doug? I think that's Doug. It just says D. Well, I think that is Doug. Yes, thank you, Doug. Thank you, Doug. Okay, so we got automatically got the jester hat. Did I really not bring the jester hat over again? I swear, I'm losing my mind. Where did it go? Give me a second. Where's my jester hat? Got it. Okay. Thank you, Doug. So we're already at 1. Perfect. 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 Okay. Um, but hey, I do have a nice facial hydration serum, Meowzord, so I guess we could. Right, Louise? How cruel of me for accommodating my mother. I love my mother. Okay, so ooh, and it needs to look a little good. All right, so we got 1. That's perfect. Okay, so Um, uh, Thank you for that, Doug. So this is what we're gonna do, okay? Again, if we get 2 more caller if we get up to 5, we'll do a second Jester After Dark stream. We'll probably listen to more music, maybe do a little something else on top of that if we get to 5, okay? All right. Now that I've done the self-promotion crap, uh, let's get to the good stuff, okay? The first thing we're gonna talk about, is we are going to talk about shame versus guilt societies, okay? And I was inspired to do this. Oh my god, okay, I thought my shirt was coming unbuttoned there randomly. We're the first thing we're gonna do is talk about that. And this is based off of a this is anthropology. It's a pretty short presentation, but I want us to talk about it, how it applies to our different societies, right? We all come from different places in the world in here, and different cultures do this differently. And if the person in here who originally sent me the video on Discord about shame versus guilt societies, I haven't watched the video, but one of the reasons I'm doing this is so that we will watch that video after my presentation, so that we have some context for what I'm guessing it's going to talk about. Um, so so Matt Guy, yes, how did hello pizza. Yes, pizza. So we're gonna watch that as soon as I do a little presentation on shame, guilt, and fear in societies. Okay. So Matt Guy, to answer your question, yes, this is this I've had it for a very long time. It is a Christian thing, I think. Um, I just think it's pretty. There's like a little pendant on it with Latin. I think it's like, some sort of saint pendant, but I like the, like, eyes and stuff on it, there's, like, little eyes. I'm pretty sure it was a gift from my mother, I believe, so that is why I wear it, I like the way it looks. Okay, so let us, get into shame and guilt societies. Okay. All right, let's talk, folks. Let's talk. Okay. This little thing is like right in my face. There we go. I'll move it there. There we go. That's a little better. Okay. Let's talk about guilt and shame society, shall we? Um, yeah, from what I've heard, Pizza, she's a great commentator. So I'm excited to watch it with everyone. Uh, it might be Meowsort. My mom may have gotten it from a monastery, actually. It might have gotten it from a monastery in Europe. Or I have to remember if I have to go ask her. I can't believe I can't remember. I've worn it for so long. I've lost track of what it is. But anyway, okay. So, let's talk. Okay, shame, guilt, and fear. Now, this is okay, then Meowsort almost certainly was blessed then, because I do remember that it's a blessed object that I'm so yeah, okay. From like I don't know, it's from 12 years ago or something like that. Yeah, of course, atheist here, but still great artistic value and such. Okay, so let's talk about this. Okay, now we this you know what? Well, I'll just start. I'll just start. Okay, we're going to talk about shame, guilt, and fear as social control. By the way, as social control in culture. Okay, now the person who really studied this a lot was Ruth Benedict. Okay. Yes, Sama, thank you very much, Sama. That was a great comment you made on that video. Sama says, "Hey there, I'm Sama. If you recall my comment from Egypt, glad I caught the stream, Sama. I'm very glad. That was a great comment you made there. Sama made a great comment on my video about Israel Palestine, and I actually pinned it to the top of the comments because it was so great. So yes, hello, Sama. Welcome to the chat. Okay, so Ruth Benedict was an American anthropologist. All right. Uh, and she 1887 to 1948, she was from a while ago. This is a picture of her on the right, okay? The she, and by the way, Salma, you're not the only Egyptian in here. We also got AMA Gaming in here who's an Egyptian, okay? All right. So she was born in New York. And she actually formed a romantic relationship with Margaret Mead. If anyone here, people here have heard of Margaret Mead, I'm guessing, another very famous anthropologist. They were in a romantic relationship together, which, by the way, was kind of kept secret because, especially at this time, really wouldn't want to out yourself as being a lesbian. But regardless, they were in a romantic relationship together. They had there's a series of beautiful letters they sent each other while they were in different parts of the world. If you can look them up, they're quite beautiful. Okay, and she became the first woman recognized as a prominent leader of a learned profession. Okay, hello Mithril, welcome Mithril. Okay, um, yeah, go ahead, Sama. Go I head over there, Sama. It's actually pinned, Sama, at the top of the YouTube chat. I pinned the link to the Twitch if you want to look there. Okay. All right. She wrote this book. Okay. Exactly, Pete. So they were roommates. Okay. She wrote a book called The Chrysanthemum and the Sword. Okay. And it was a study of the society and culture of Japan, and it was published in 1946, so the year after the war ended, the World War II ended, okay? And she did a ton of research during the war on Japan, and the result was that book. Now, there are some critiques we could have of this work, The Chrysanthemum and the Sword. One is that because she was doing the research during World War II, she never actually went to Japan. All of her cultural research is based off things that were written words and things produced in Japan that she then got her hands on in the United States, and did the research based off of the cultural creations of Japan. Most anthropologists would say that that is not you also need to go to the culture, experience the culture, talk to the people in the culture, but she was limited in what she could do. Regardless, she wrote this book about Japan, which is still really good to read today, okay, called The Chrysanthemum and the Sword. Another thing to note here is that she part of the reason she was doing this during the war was to better understand Japan for the sake of defeating them in the war. Okay. That being said, if you read the book, she doesn't speak bad about the Japanese, okay, badly. But just know that that was partially the goal, okay? And she's the one that developed this theory of shame versus guilt societies, okay? Or shame and guilt in society, and then also fear, okay? All right. So Ruth Benedict, she proposed that different cultures utilize social control in one of three different ways. All right. So this is a superstructural idea. Okay. So this is a way that different people from different cultures think about themselves and their culture. Okay. And it is a mechanism of social control in any given culture. Okay, so it basically helps maintain stability in society, supports the power structure, political structure of a society. It benefits just the functioning of the society, like people being able to work together and things like that. Okay, and she said that there are three ways that societies do this. Okay, one is shame, two is guilt, and three is fear. Um, and and as she went on to say that um, the differences can apply. So depending on whether you're mainly a fear, guilt, or shame society, affects how behavior is governed in respect to government laws, business rules, and social etiquette. Okay. Now, here's the thing. Ruth Benedict was very bright, okay, and she kind of overgeneralized for the sake of the argument she was making. All societies utilize these three things: shame, guilt, and fear. But she believed certain societies would typically use shame or guilt more, and then all societies use some amount of fear. Okay, so when she spoke about Japan, she focused on um right, Matt Saigai, she focused on Japan as being a shame based society, And then when it comes to like America and a lot of European countries, she viewed those as guilt-based societies. So she had this idea that Japan and Eastern cultures were shame-based societies. Quote unquote Western cultures are guilt-based societies. Okay. There you go, pizza. Okay. Okay. Uh, yeah. Pizza says we briefly talked about this in government class. Specifically, we discussed shame as a form of public punishment and whether or not it would deter or reinforce crime or immoral behavior. And we're going to get into that, pizza, because it's a very interesting question. Okay, so let's talk about what these mean. Um, and again, like I said, she kind of overgeneralized. It's now pretty much acknowledged that every culture uses these to some degree, but some cultures are much more into shame versus much more into guilt. Okay, so all right, so guilt. Um, in a guilt society, okay, control is maintained by creating and continuously reinforcing the internalized individual feeling of guilt, okay? Um, a and, and that guilt is linked to an expectation of punishment, um, uh, 'kay, either now or in some sort of afterlife, okay? Um, and that has to do with certain behaviors you engage in, okay? Um, so in guilt societies, a person of that type of culture might ask when thinking about a behavior that they're doing, is my behavior fair or unfair? Is my behavior good or bad? Okay. It is this type of culture emphasizes individual conscience and a subjective view of one's behavior. So it's mostly internal, right? You feel guilt, okay, and you subject yourself to guilt, and you kind of decide you make the decision is like what I'm doing good, is it bad? Is it fair? Is it unfair? Okay. And there's other things that go along with this. Like a lot of times, even in legal systems, there's like the idea of proving guilt, proving guilt. So guilt can result in external punishment, but it can also be, excused, right? If you're guilty and then you admit your guilt and you show remorse, you will often be forgiven, okay? So again, it's internal. It is about feeling guilt, like an individual feeling guilt, okay? And then lots of times you can get rid of that guilt through, atonement, and things like that, okay? So it's internalized. Does that make sense? Thank you so much, pizza. Thank you so much, pizza. Thank you so much, pizza, for that donation there. Okay, one more, folks, and I'll put on the jester caller. Okay, all right. So that's a guilt society. We live in a guilt society. At least in the United States, we do. Okay. Um, we live. A lot of European countries have sort of a guilt-based society, right? It is much easier to be redeemed if you're in a guilt-based society, okay? Because there is less external pressure on you. It is mainly an internal struggle, right? Okay. Um, okay. So let's go on now to shame-based societies. So shame. In a shame society, uh, the means of control is the inculcation of shame and the complementary threat of public ostracism. So what the hell does that mean? Okay. So uh th- in these kind of societies, um in these kind of societies, right? Uh Societal perception of action. So not your personal perception, but the the people in your culture's perception of your actions is what matters. Okay. It is not this internalized guilt thing where it's like, am I doing, is this good? Is this bad? Should I feel guilty about this? No. The idea here is, as it says here, a person in this type of culture may ask, will I look ashamed if I do X, or will I be shamed if I do this, or how will people look at me if I do this? Okay, it is much more externalized, right? Um, in these kind of cultures, right, there is doing thing. It's very important. Actions are much more important than like intent behind those actions, than how you feel about those actions. It is what your actual actions, um, and and how the rest of the society judges you, okay, for those actions. Carlitos says nothing like Western anthropologists analyzing non-Western societies through a Western moral lens. Carlitos, I will say you're right. Okay, there is a lot of these folks you've noticed, folks, anthropologists are from Western nations. Okay, which means that they have a particular set of moral values and things like that. I will say though, in Ruth Benedict's case, there have been Japanese anthropologists who have verified a lot of what she said. This is very true. Okay, so and in her writing, unlike some older anthropologists, she did not judge. She was not being like one of these is worse than the other. Okay, she just kind of tried to examine it. Um, but there are some issues with this, Carlitos. Okay, You're absolutely right, Carlitos. Did you hear I don't know if you heard what I said, Carlitos. Yeah, she never did field work, but the issue here being though that I say later other people did in fact um, do field work and discovered a lot of it was true, although it's not perfect. You're absolutely right about that, Carlitos. Yeah. Okay. Um, all right. Okay. All right. So we have these two conceptions of society: guilt-based societies and shame-based societies. Does this make sense? Okay. So shame is more when if you do something wrong, and society sees you doing something wrong, you will be ostracized. And you will be socially or legally punished for it. There is no sense of atonement, right? You can't really atone until society has had its say. Okay. Um, absolutely, Silas. It was. So at the beginning of this presentation, Silas, I talk about how Ruth Benedict. That's one of the flaws of her work. Okay, is that she did armchair anthropology, but she was only the first one to talk about this. Later anthropologists did a lot more on this that was not field armchair. I just mentioned her because she's like the first one that did it. Okay, but yeah, okay. Um, all right. Okay. All right. So, and so in shame societies, yeah, like in shame societies, you get socially punished for things you do that are perceived as breaking social norms. Okay. And another thing about shame societies, a lot of shame, quote unquote, shame based societies um, are kind of have a very strong sense of honor. And so like and so for example, if you get shamed, it harms your honor, right? And there's not really a way to recover that because it's not about like atonement, okay? So not being shamed is extremely important in a lot of these cultures, okay? And defending your honor because honor is about how others perceive you, right? While in guilt societies, you can seek atonement, and it's not really an issue of honor; it's an issue of guilt. And then, have you paid for what you did, or have you sought atonement? Okay, all right. Um, so a lot of these cultures have a really strong basis in honor, which means they're very careful about how they are perceived publicly by the rest of the community, how their families are perceived publicly by the rest of the community, and they're very careful with these words. Exactly, Carlito, saving face. Okay, very true. Okay, so those are that is what matters there, if that makes sense. Okay. All right. Now, I'm not going into terrible detail here. Meowzord. Okay, Meowzord says, regarding your previous line about society, do you think shame-based societies had more base societal fragility? Like shame holds more fragile society afloat. So, Meowzord, yes. Now this is my opinion, folks, and we're going to be watching a video that Pizza sent about analyzing which one is better. Okay, I'm guessing that's what it does, Pizza. I would say societies are better. Now, not in all ways, not in every way, because, for example, let me give you an example of where a shame based society might kind of not work as well. In a shame based society, society's perception of you is all that matters. So let's say you are not guilty of something that you have been accused or you have been viewed as doing. It doesn't matter. Okay. Perception, the perception of you is what matters. While in a guilt society, discovering guilt is very important. So if you're not actually guilty, then it's thought that you don't deserve the negative backlash. So that would be one example of where one might be better than the one might be that might be if you want. I'm not trying to judge these. I'm just saying that might be an example of where shame societies are not as great. However, I think shame societies are much better at keeping people from being assholes and keeping people behaving in a way that's not harmful to others and is beneficial for everyone. Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely think that. We could use some more goddamn shame in American society. I'll tell you what, we could absolutely use more shame in this society. I mean, just look at our goddamn government. Okay. Like, we need these people to be shamed. Okay. Uh, okay. Yeah, absolutely, pizza. So if you get shamed, um, uh, are shame societies like the ones where cancel culture will thrive most strongly? That's a good question, Carlise. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I'd have to think about that more. Yeah, pizza says shame means you get rejected. So you literally get rejected from the society, while guilt means doing penance. Okay. All right. Last thing here, okay? Fear. Now, there are no societies on earth that are primarily fear-based, okay? This is all societies have some degree of all three of these. Quote unquote Western societies are typically far more and again, I don't like using these terms, right? But I'm just for the sake of ease, Western societies typically are more towards guilt. Eastern societies are typically more about shame. And then fear, there is some element of fear in all of them. Okay. So fear is where social control is kept by a fear of retribution. Okay. Um, uh, and the fear worldview focuses on physical dominance. Okay. Like, yeah, okay. So if someone in a fear-based society situation might think, "Will someone hurt me if I do this?" Okay? And yeah, a lot of times Carlito says or Mithril says the USA seems fear-based right now. There are some anthropologists and political scientists that say that in authoritarian regimes you see a massive increase in the fear basis of social control. Obviously. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. So yeah, I think we're seeing a lot more fear in American society. Someone meant North Korea. Very good, Robert. Meowzord, the Roman Empire. Absolutely. Stalinism. Yeah, right, Carlito. So fear, there is some element of that in every society, but it doesn't tend to dominate unless you're in an authoritarian situation. Okay. And it's pretty ineffective. You can't maintain a fear society for terribly long without some big issues. Okay. Pizza. I've noticed Eurocentric and Christian ideas of guilt in guilt societies. In non Christian societies, there's a lot more shame. Pizza, you're not wrong. Okay. You're not wrong there at all. And maybe I should say Christian based societies versus another basis of society. Okay. Okay. This map here is extremely not scientific. I just wanted to throw that out there. Okay. extremely not scientific. Um, and I've seen anthropologists make multiple maps like this, and they all disagree with each other. Okay, this is a map of what are called as guilt versus fear societies. I have some complaints about it, but it's a good general idea here. So the countries that are blue have more guilt-based societies, all right? In theory. I would actually argue that there are some like Latin American countries that are more guilt-based. That this okay, it's confused, it's complicated, but you see here that like the United States, Canada, um uh things like that, some of the South American societies in Europe, Australia, South Africa, guilt-based societies, and then you have a lot of Africa, the Middle East, Asian societies are shame-based societies. Okay, um, again, I would gladly quibble with anyone about this at any point because this is not scientific. It's just sort of a general guide to what some anthropologists have said. Okay, all right, okay. So now that we've talked about this, that's the end of my presentation. There you go, Meowzord. A lot of the societies that are more guilt-based are more individualistic, right? And there's another phrase in anthropology. It is individualistic versus collectivist. And a lot of times, societies are measured by their individualism or their collectivism. And yeah, okay. The United States and a lot of European places are really not collectivist at all. They're very individualistic. Um, okay. Um, so if that makes sense, okay. And again, these are all as I said, so Mithril says it seems a very negative view of humanity. I try and be more positive. Yeah, and Mithril, again, Mithril, well, I will say this, Mithril, there's an issue with these big overarching anthropological theories, and I will say, most anthropologists today have gotten away from them. But they are good general guides, but they're not like evolution in terms of having like a provable generalized thing, because human beings are human beings, right? Everyone is different, okay? Everyone is different. So to generalize is rough, right? Which is why when we study culture, we try to think of general trends of behavior amongst groups of people, right? Rather than looking at individuals. But that does leave out individuals, okay? Anyway, that's true, Carlitos. Thomas Hobbes had a very good view of human, not a good view, but had a very a good understanding of human nature, in my opinion. Anyway, okay. So what I want to do now is Pizza. Thank you very much, Pizza. Sent us a video about shame versus guilt societies. I haven't seen it, but I believe in the video she's going to be kind of saying that we need more shame in America. Um, and by the way, Meowzord, I'm sorry, I keep interrupting myself. Meowzord said a lot of the older societies on Earth are more shame based. That is true, Meowzord. And I'm curious, Meowzord, if you have a theory as to why that is. Why do you think, I guess, civilizations slash cultures that have a longer lasting might be more shame-based than more guilt-based? Just a question. I don't know the answer to it. Aha, Meowzord. Okay. Um, uh, um, okay. Thank you. Okay. Interesting, Meowzord. Prosperity versus scarcity. That is very possible, Meowzord. As a matter of fact, folks, a lot of the, if you notice, folks, a lot of the shame-based societies on this map have suffered tremendously historically in a lot of ways. Okay. Uh, and have occasionally had trouble accessing the resources they needed to survive. Um, and it might be that shame-based society is much more relevant to societies that need to maintain social order to prevent like a collapse or things like that. There are theories about this, okay? Right, Robert? Germany, okay? Anyway, okay, let's go on. Let's watch this video now that Pizza sent us. So, This is called "Guilt Doesn't Work, Does Shame." Um, yeah, absolutely, Carlitos, right? But you can imagine Carlitos. So Carlitos says guilt requires a greater deal of individualism feels in society. Yes. But you can imagine, though, Carlitos, in a society that is deeply suffering and needs people to work together, individualism becomes a really big problem. And like places like China have historically had millions of people dying from civil wars, famines, and things like that. And now you in China today in China, you have a very collectivist society because over time, you people may have started thinking individualism doesn't work here. Okay, we need to think about the benefit of all of us, otherwise, none of us will survive. Okay, this is complicated, but it's a very interesting, like historically, if you look at how these places developed, and I can even tell you in America. Um, well, no, Matt Saiga, that exactly right, Matt Saiga. Matt Saiga, I don't believe they had trouble accessing resources. What I mean by that, Matt Saiga, is that yeah, their resources were taken from them a lot of the time. India, for example, was also invaded by people like the Mongols. There was a lot of conflict going on. Um, I mean, like from outsiders coming into India. Then, of course, they were exploited by colonialists. Same thing in China. Africa, very exploited by colonists. Okay. You can see how collectivism might develop or shame might develop when you're in that scenario. Okay. Um, okay, very possibly, Doug, and that's an guys. You guys are outsmarting me here. Okay, Doug says difference between rice and wheat as the main crop. Rice, okay, rice-based crops, right? Are much more intensive when it comes to agriculture. And to survive off rice, you need a lot of labor. You need people focused on doing that. There's a lot of interesting stuff about rice versus wheat-based societies. Okay. Although admittedly, a lot of these places cultivate both rice and wheat. Okay, like India does, Japan does. Again, we can debate this at some other point. Okay, so let's watch this video. I'm very happy. I'm excited to watch it. It's called "Guilt Doesn't Work, Does Shame: Shame Society versus Guilt Culture" video essay. Okay. Um, I'm sorry. One last thing. I was about to mention this. So I talked about China, for example. America, on the other hand, okay, we have not experienced an invasion for like a very long time. Not only that, if historically in America, if you didn't like living in a certain part of America, you could just take your family, get up and move out west, move somewhere else. Okay. So shame didn't develop as much in America because, well, you can just leave. Okay. You can go settle, you can go kill some Native American. I know I'm being cruelly blunt here. You can just go slaughter some natives, take their land, and settle there. Okay. Not always. Sometimes they would just go and settle after the natives had been killed. But that allows people to be more individualistic, right? Um, okay. Regardless, that's a debatable thing. We can debate that. Let us talk about yeah, okay. Um um yeah, correct, Doug. In India, there's a lot more, I believe there's a lot more wheat cultivation in the north, rice cultivation in the south. Japan has sort of a mixed wheat, barley, rice cultivation. China is mainly rice. They have a lot of other things now too. But anyway, okay, let's watch this. Okay. Thank you again, Pizza, for sending this. Let's see what she has to say. I may pause it occasionally to make comments.
Brought to you with the help of my
I need to put on my headphones. As it starts, folks, I'm gonna turn my fan on. It's not hot in here, so I'm listening.
lovely patrons.
In order for nonviolence to work, your opponent must have a conscience. The United States has none.
In 1946, the book The Chrysanthemum and the Sword, Patterns of Japanese Culture was published and penned by Ruth Benedict, a U.S. anthropologist who was tasked by the White House to do a study on Japanese culture. Her book was a culture at a distance study, in that U.S. anthropologists could not study Imperial Japan nor Nazi Germany in real time during the war, so they went afterwards to try to uncover and understand what they could. Her study was novel at the time, and I'd argue still today, despite it being understandably controversial due to the fact that it tries to sum up an entirety of a culture in one book, and was written at a time that was historically very unique to the world, and thus could never be a good summation of Japanese culture at large. American scholar C. Douglas Loomis has written criticisms of Benedict's book in that it represented the ideology of a class for that of the entire culture, a state of acute social dislocation for a normal condition.
So these are great critiques. I just want to read what Matt Saigai said here. Matt Saigai says, having lived in a shame-driven society, I hated it almost always for the simple reason that it has inhibited people from people doing a lot of things. Socially acceptable ones, of course. What they think that they wanted to think, because they thought basically, what would society think? Yeah, Matt Saigai. And I think there are pros and cons to both. Yeah. Okay. That's a really interesting point, Matt Saigai.
And an extraordinary moment.
Oh, one last note here. When we're talking about shame and guilt societies, right? We have to understand that just because you're a shame or guilt society doesn't mean the things you shame or guilt people for are good things to do that for, right? So we try to imagine a scenario where you had like a shame or a guilt-based society based off like things that are actually moral. That might change the equation. That being said, that's not how these things operate in reality, right? It's an interesting way to think about it. Anyway, I got you. Hardly ever inhibited people. Oh, I see what you're saying. Matt Saigai hardly ever inhibited people from doing socially unacceptable things, so didn't see any real value for it. That's fair, Matt Saigai. That's a really interesting point. Meowsor, true, Matt Saigai, but also depends on the society. Yeah, this is very complicated. That's really interesting, though, Matt Saigai. The zeitgeist, okay?
In a nation's history as an unvarying norm of social behavior, essentially using wartime Japan as a barometer for Japanese culture and societal norms. The most memorable part of her study, and what brings us here today, is the chapter Dilemma of Virtue, in which she discusses the idea of a shame versus guilt society. She describes the Japanese living under a shame society and the US under a guilty one. She writes on page 222, "In Japan, one cultivates self-respect, they say, because of society. If there were no society, one would not need to respect oneself." These are extreme statements of an external sanction for self-respect. They are statements which take no account of internal sanctions for proper behavior. The Japanese sometimes react as strongly as any Puritan to a private accumulation of guilt, but their extreme statements nevertheless point out correctly where the emphasis falls in Japan. It falls.
So, just a note here. This is interesting. I really like this already, Pizza. The one of the issues here, right, about a shame-based society, right, is that there are no internal sanctions. So a lot of times when if you're in a shame-based society, and let's say you're fighting in war and there is no society around you to inhibit behavior, it can result in some pretty awful things. Not, by the way, that doesn't happen in guilt societies. Don't get me wrong. But I remember reading once about like the Japanese rape of Nanking and how they had no inhibitions on what they were doing there. Partially because there was no inhibition on it. You see what I mean? There was no society there. Again, though, I'm way overgeneralizing here, and I don't want us to think that I'm like trying to make uh, declarative statements about entire groups of people. But it's an interesting thing to think about. Um, yeah, exactly, Mithril. That's very true. Okay. Yeah, I love Lord of the Flies pizza. Okay.
On the importance of shame rather than on the importance of guilt. In anthropological studies of different cultures, the distinction between those which rely heavily on shame and those that rely heavily on guilt are an important one. A society that inculcates absolute standards of morality and relies on men's developing a conscience is a guilty culture by definition. Keep a pin in this for later. But a man in such a society may, as in the US, suffer in addition from shame when he accuses himself of gaucheries which are in no way sins.
Okay, real fast. I know I keep pausing. This is a problem with guilt-based societies, right? We all know plenty of people who have no sense of guilt, or if they do, they're not guilty about things they should be guilty about, right? So, guilt-based societies are reliant upon the individual morality of people and the individual sense of guilt. So, if you're a guiltless person, if you're someone who doesn't feel like anything they do is wrong, you got an issue because then there's nothing really inhibiting you. Would like the Trump administration. Okay. Okay.
He may be exceedingly chagrined about not dressing appropriately for the occasion or about a slip of the tongue. In a culture where shame is a major sanction,
There we
people
go.
are chagrined about acts which we expect people to feel
Ooh,
guilty
Carlitos,
about.
that's
This
amazing.
chagrin can be very intense and it cannot be relieved, as guilt can be by confession and atonement. A man who has sinned can get relief by unburdening himself. This device of confession is used in our secular therapy and by many religious groups which otherwise have little in common. Where shame is the major sanction, a man does not experience relief when he makes his fault public, even to a confessor. So long as his bad behavior does not get out into the world, he need not be troubled, and confession appears to him merely a way of courting trouble. Shame cultures therefore do not provide for confessions, even to the gods. They have ceremonies for good luck rather than expiation. In short,
Interesting. That's very interesting. I'd add something else to add to this. How there's not really ceremonies in Japan or like in shame cultures. I mean to like forgiveness and like atonement. Um, this is just kind of a side note here. One of the issues in guilt societies is that because clergy members, it's like Christian clergy members, etc., are the ones that are for many people are considered the ones that one atones to. That also gives organized religion a lot more power because well, I mean, if you're telling a priest, for example, everything you're guilty of, that gives them a lot of power over you, does it not? And you typically see a lot less organized religion in or in shame societies than you do in um, guilt societies, which typically have more organized religion. Anyway,
true shame cultures rely on external sanctions for good behavior, not, as true guilt cultures do, on an internalized conviction of sin. The Japanese man orients himself towards the verdict.
Thank you, Malzord. Thank you, Malzord. And Matt's like I'm overgeneralizing. A religious organization in there is a religious organization in some shame societies. Okay, thank you, Matt Malzord. Malzord just sent 300, which means we are now at 3. We are now at 3 super chats. We only need 2 more, and then I will do another late night stream. Jester After Dark. Matt Saiga, I know. So a lot of these things are massively overgeneralized. Yeah, there are religious organizations and stuff in shame-based societies, but some anthropologists have pointed out that, like, maybe I'm framing it wrong, but like in a lot of guilt-based societies, like Christian societies, there is a lot more direct power linked to religious organizations. But you're right; that's a very big generalization there. Absolutely. And now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, you're right. There's like Muslim traditions, Hindu traditions. I mean, religious organizations. So perhaps that's an incorrect theory I heard. All right.
Of others. Shame, they say, is the root of virtue. A man who is sensitive to it will carry out all the rules of a good man's behavior. A man who knows shame is sometimes translated to virtuous man, sometimes man of honor. Shame has the same place of authority in Japanese ethics that a clear conscience and being right with God and the avoidance of sin have in Western ethics. And though Benedict does say that the two aren't mutually exclusive, and we haven't even gotten into the culture of fear yet, which isn't mutually exclusive in the spectrum either,
That's the map I showed you guys. This is great.
I think the main argument holds up. The US, in my opinion, is a culture based on puritanical guilt, and individual guilt is used in order to uphold social norms and larger systems. We live in a country where we're brought up to believe that people will do the right thing because otherwise they'll feel an internal sense of guilt and come forward and apologize. And though a noble sentiment to think everyone in society will grow a conscience and do the right thing, in practice it's a different story. Hence, why we have the modern judicial system in the US that is supposed to work on the idea that you're innocent until proven guilty. We have supposed law and order to find guilty people, as with guilt, it's an individual internal struggle that must be discovered, not something that is readily apparent. And unfortunately, even the justice system that is in theory supposed to protect and work for the people, instead by design protects the ultra wealthy and go after whoever they deem as unworthy, whether it be immigrants, black people, the poor and unhoused, and the LGBTQ+ community. In Benedict's book, the guilt culture is preferred by her in that, as she notes, there is no way to really relieve oneself of shame other than through punishment or a public shaming, or back in the
It is a great scene. If anyone's seen, Game of Thrones, that scene, shame. Like that's classic example of, publicly being shamed. Which is a religious organization, which goes back to Matt Saigai's point about that one theory. I'm probably misremembering this theory. It may have been Japan versus like Europe or something like that. Maybe I'm messing it up, but you're totally right, Matt Saigai. I'm just kind of spitballing.
day a public execution. In shame culture, you are judged by your peers openly, and your shame needs to be reckoned with by society. It's not up to you as an individual to just feel bad and be punished by the law. That's not enough. And the idea that we might need to bring back public shaming makes a lot of people, especially Democrats and liberals, uncomfortable because that's just not what civilized modern societies filled with moderates do, even when their political opponents would gladly dance on their graves. Though, as Foucault writes, the first time the guillotine was used, the Chronique de Paris, and I don't speak French, reported that people complained that they could not see anything and chanted, "Give us back our gallows." But it's not something, let's say again, that modern civilized Western thinking countries like the US would take part in, at least not in 1946 when this book was published. Though France is one of those modern Western thinking countries, their politics are much more left-leaning compared to the U.S. Democratic Party, and they have a proud history of violent revolution. Just look at their Olympic opening ceremony. And even recently as 2022, Dutch author Marcel H. van Herpen wrote that the U.S. is at risk of becoming a shame society, insinuating that shame societies are not good. In his book, The Rise of the Shame Society, America's Change from a Guilt Culture into a Shame Culture, he weighs the arguments for and against the shame society and concludes that a guilt-centered approach remains preferable. And that's funny to me because if anything, I see a trend going in the other direction, at least in 2025, 3 years later. There's a popular meme of people wanting to bring back public shaming, of wanting to be able to shame others for their individual choices because many people in power in the US at least are both shameless and don't see themselves as guilty of any social transgression, or crime even, whether they're justifying school shootings or saying to get along with a deceased white supremacist.
Yeah, I will say, regardless, I think we definitely do need more shame in American society. I'm not saying we need to be a shame-based society, but we need some more balance here. We need much more shame, okay? Because we need some more socially dependent norms of good behavior. I know right, Robert. Okay. Like a lot of these politicians and stuff just get away with, don't feel any sense of shame. And their success or failure is not based at all about how their actions are perceived by society, essentially.
As professor of philosophy, Olufemi O. Taiwo wrote for the Boston Review in response to Ezra Klein's op-ed on white supremacist Charlie Kirk doing politics the right way, shame is essential. Shame serves as a robustly liberal alternative to the political violence that Klein and company rightly abhor. It is quite literally the least one can do to ensure rules of social conduct that upheld minimal levels of dignity for all involved. This is one valuable function of shame. It reminds us of who we want to be when we fall short, a goalpost that is necessarily anchored to the lofty height that our conduct fell beneath. We also encourage and defend these general social standards when we hold others to them, and not just ourselves. Because let's be real here, most of us aren't good at holding ourselves accountable. And with money and power in the mix, no one is willingly going to look in the mirror and give that up because they might feel a little guilty. What's more likely is that they feel no remorse because in their eyes and with their own moral compass, they still think they're in the right. Even after Ted Bundy was found guilty, it was hard to ever really tell if he felt that he was guilty. or that he even felt remorse. And what's worse still is that the public shaming that was supposed to happen turned into a fan frenzy of people actually wishing to get closer to him. People who commemorated his death were seen as wrong by the Conversations with the Killer Ted Bundy Netflix series. And though I agree that the state shouldn't be allowed to execute people, I don't know if it's right to say that people can't also revel in the death of someone who was a serial killer who reveled in the murder of.
Yeah, and that's an issue, right? Okay, I don't know if I want to say this is an issue, but we like criticize people who like revel in the downfall of bad people. Like, don't say that about them. Yeah, they were bad, but you can't say that, right? Well, maybe they need some shame. Maybe they need some shame. Just saying, not naming any names, just saying, okay?
Others. What do you think? And the authoritarian leaders of today clearly don't feel guilt either for what they're bringing upon the most
Mhm.
vulnerable. Most people don't want to wait for dictators to have a moral growth spurt. Shame is the more uncomfortable option.
Yeah, Pete. So he had a wife and kids, and I'm not saying anyone in particular. I'm just saying, okay, like we need some more shame here. And it's kind of lived up when people are talk that way, when they're like, "Don't say that." Yeah, okay.
It hurts to be publicly scorned by our peers, but it might be the only way to combat fascist ideology and authoritarian leaders, whether they be politicians or tech billionaires. Though I'm slightly on the more cynical side that these types of people are just shameless. It's not even that they're shameless. Their peers, who should be holding them accountable, have no incentive to do so. Even though to feel shame, you don't need to be found legally guilty or feel morally so. Because one is shameless, how can they in turn
Yeah, a lot of times the inability to feel shame is linked to your power, right? We have such wealth inequality in this country that people at the very top can essentially, um, uh, they can essentially insulate themselves from the rest of society, go into their gated neighborhood, hang out around other elites, and like even if you had a shame society, if you had that level of wealth inequality, what's going to keep the people at the top shamed? They can separate themselves from society, and they have the power to do that, and, so I think that would have to increase the shame of those people, you'd have to first get rid of all their vast wealth. Um, yeah, absolutely, Sir Samuel, okay, agreed, and just things they view negatively in society, even if they aren't harmful, yep.
feel
Um,
shame? On the other hand, like Taiwo said, shaming is simply the liberal alternative to fighting back against hate. It's the least we can do. Public condemnation and holding others accountable. And therefore, we should be able to do it freely without fear. From what I can see, I think the masses, at least on the left, want to bring back public shaming to make those in power feel something, because clearly they don't feel guilty for their beliefs or actions. I mean, we have a convicted felon as a president. How can guilt still be
yeah.
preferable? But Stokely Carmichael, later known as Kwame Ture, one of the leaders of the Pan-African movement and the Black Panther Party, already knew that in the 1960s, saying, "In order for nonviolence to work, your opponent must have a conscience. The U.S. has none. The white
Yeah.
wealthy people in the U.S. and those in power do not have a conscience. Therefore, they cannot feel guilt." And now we're trying to shift that to shame. Let's see how that works.
Right, Carlitos? Yeah, right, Pizza?
On the face of it, shame and guilt seem very similar, and both are used to uphold social and moral norms and in turn, what is seen as illegal and legal in the eyes of the law. Though it should be noted that something being illegal or legal doesn't make it moral or immoral, as many laws are made to protect the wealthy and hurt the masses,
Yep.
like vagrancy laws that make it illegal to be homeless, or the laws that barred gay people from getting married, for instance. But in reality, guilt and shame do have their differences. In the 2018 paper reconsidering the differences between shame and guilt published in the European Journal of Psychology, the authors wrote, "Shame implies perceived lack of power to meet the standards of one's ideal self, whereas guilt implies perceived power and willingness to be harmful, that is, to violate the standards of one's moral self. The main difference between guilt and shame is that one is an inward struggle and the other is an outward
Right, drum failed, it does sound like the convo we had.
one. According to this distinction, shame is elicited by public faults and one's fear of others' negative evaluations, whereas guilt is a private feeling elicited by one's own negative self-evaluation. However, the researchers of this paper question this framework by saying that one can feel shame even when their societal or moral discretion is not known to the world. The public versus private distinction is not decisive in that shame can be felt even privately, they write. We suggest that the disapproved person will not experience shame, and certainly not guilt, when their discretion is made public, but other possible feelings, such as fear of the consequences of the negative evaluation, disappointment and resentment for having received an undeserved evaluation, helplessness elicited by the perceived inability to modify others' judgment, or most notably, embarrassment, which implies no necessary negative self-evaluation. Embarrassment, they write,
Yeah.
is a universal human phenomenon that can be
Uh-huh.
used to modify people's behavior and actions, as when one even feels internal shame.
I am all for embarrassment. All for
That
embarrassment.
doesn't necessarily mean they'll change or feel guilty, but they will feel embarrassed if it comes out to the public. That's why whenever someone can embarrass Trump, for example, or he falls into an embarrassing situation, it makes headlines because maybe he doesn't feel shame or guilt, but maybe we can still take some power away by embarrassing him, even if it's just by happenstance like Escalator Gate. Or with Pedro Pascal calling JKR a loser. That's embarrassing, being called out like that. Or going back even further to Trump, the whole
But
Kefevi thing. Though how much power is that really taking back? I don't know. What I do know is that though the two function similarly, and one can even feel shame without being publicly shamed, they are different in that to feel guilt you need to have some semblance of empathy or conscience, but to feel shame is a bit
yeah.
more complicated. Shame doesn't come by itself. It comes with other negative emotions like fear, resentment, helplessness, and can be much deeper than guilt, which can be washed
Right.
away, at least in the US, with an
Right, Robert.
apology or some form of atonement. So does that mean that it would work better to have shame as a consequence for transgressions such as inciting hate speech or a government coup or even something on a smaller scale like school bullying than having a guilty conscience or a guilty sentence? It's a big question that I don't have a simple answer for. Taiwo writes on the possibility of using shaming as a punishment for inciting hate against minorities and white supremacy that the point is that the possibility of overreach, as shame can run much deeper than guilt, is a price worth paying. Most of the alternatives involved either
Yeah, so folks, a lot of good comments here. Shin, hello, Shin. The secondary reaction to embarrassment can be anger too. Yeah, you're right, Shin. It absolutely can. But that's why, Shin, we need, instead of just embarrassment, we need a self-reflective embarrassment where when you get embarrassed, you feel a sense of shame and you analyze your own behavior and change it, right? But of course, a lot of times embarrassment, people don't engage in self-reflection afterwards. But you're right, it can be anger, very much so, Shin. Matt Saigai, the countries that are classified as guilt-based are the ones who were at one point shame-based, in my opinion, because they're the ones who colonized the shame-based societies to inculcate ideas of shame that the shame-based societies feel in today's world, including sexual repression. I could see that, Matt Saigai. I don't fully agree. Like, what I mean by that is, yes, you're right that, like, for example, Western guilt societies inculcated a lot of horrific morals, or like moral standards into other countries, like suppression of sexuality, things like that. I don't think, though, that I don't think that, like, the shame they which then became part of the shame structure of those other societies. Um, I don't really know of a time when, like, Europe was, shame-based. I see what you mean, and you might partially be right here. Um, that's just my opinion, though. Again, I'm not an expert on this particular topic, but, uh, okay. Oh, I see. You mean to inculcate the ideas of shame. So, like, what is viewed as shamed behavior? Yeah, behavior that needs to be shamed. I totally agree with that. Just not the overarching idea of shame versus guilt, if that makes sense. Um, like I know, for example, in India, there was a time when people were a lot more open about like non-binary people and transgender people. But then the Europeans came, and boy, did they do a lot to change that, didn't they? Same thing with like Africa. And yeah, okay. But I see what you're saying, Matt Saigai. Okay, and welcome, by the way, Shin, welcome. And also welcome, Samuel. I don't know if I said welcome to you, Samuel, over there on Twitch.
Their subjugation, combat, or both. Put another way, disrespect and denigration as beyond the pale as grounds for exclusion from polite company is turning the temperature down. Klein and others are helping to turn it up. Not to mention, Kirk called empathy New Age BS, so why should we be empathetic in turn? Taiwo further notes, we can admit that the feeling of shame can not only be constructive but also deeply corrosive when one internalizes shame or is prompted to the emotion by others' disapproval. But so too are some of the moral and personal failures that give rise to that disapproval. In some cases, these are poisonous enough to merit the
Me too,
harsh
pizza.
medicine of shame and shaming. If not during the rise of fascism, then when? In the end,
Yeah.
using guilt as a main tactic to control people's moral compasses don't work when under capitalism we are raised to see other people, especially marginalized groups, simply as numbers, simply as a means to an end, or part of the bottom line. To reconcile morality under late-stage capitalism and hyper-individuality under a guilty versus innocent framework will never work because those in power, the sharks
Yeah.
who play the game and won,
Yeah, exactly, Matt. It's like I totally agree with you. Okay, I think I know what you mean now. Yeah, you're right. So those so-called Western values that were extremely oppressive, that were then forced upon other people in an act of colonialism, including the repression of sexuality, like transgenderism and things like that, were then destroyed. Essentially, those were destroyed by the colonists, and then integrated into the shame culture in India as something that needs to be shamed, which is like yeah, yeah, okay, I don't even I have no one else to say, you're right.
will never feel guilty, unlike shame, which seemingly runs deeper than guilt. For example, Top from Big Bang in South Korea, a shame society, was ostracized and shamed for smoking weed in 2017. Since 2017, Choi Sung-hyun, aka Top, the former lead rapper of K-pop kings Big Bang, had been persona non grata in the Korean entertainment scene, forced into the margins after being charged with smoking marijuana in his home. He was sentenced
But actually, Matt Saiga, that's a really good point. At the end there, you said until they were colonized and shamed for those values. Yeah, you're right. You are right about that. Like there was an element of shame being applied to the people of India. Interesting. I have to think more about that. That's a really interesting point.
to 10 months in prison, suspended for 2 years, and had his every move scrutinized and captured by paparazzi camera flashes. Then I ended up disappointing so many people, and at that time, I had to go through an intense darkness, Top revealed. So dark that it's hard to imagine. There were some moments back when I felt such intense and heavy shame that I just wanted to quit everything. Shame clearly does work as intended, but what people are shamed for should be well outlined. Someone smoking weed in their house shouldn't be shamed or jailed, at least in my opinion, but that was what was agreed upon in South Korea by law and by the larger entertainment industry. Agreeing on what is moral and what is immoral is another discussion entirely, as what constitutes morality is very subjective to each culture
Yeah.
and each individual. In the US, what is considered moral under white Christian nationalism is vastly different from what is considered moral in more leftist and progressive spaces. And to make things even more complicated, the right is fine in publicly shaming the Democrats and liberals, but not the other way around because we don't
Yeah.
want to stoop to their level. Democrats honed in on Trump's
Which I highly disagree with, by the way. I highly disagree with. Don't be a political slug. If they're using the tactic, you should use it too. Mithril, I wish I'd read more philosophy when I was younger. You guys make me feel, oh, Mithril, you're a super educated. You're a very bright guy. Okay. Um, yeah.
guilty sentence as a way to swing voters during the last election and uphold moral superiority. But how well did that stick considering he doesn't care? And in some regards, I'm wary about praising one tactic over another because when public shamings and executions have happened in the US, it has mostly been in service of white supremacy, like public lynchings of black boys and men. Historically in the US, shamings have been used to uphold a culture of fear and racial segregation because it has been mainly used as a tactic by conservative politicians to again uphold white supremacy, whereas guilt is the liberal alternative to give people time and space to grow and make reparations, and as a metric to again
Yeah.
uphold moral superiority
Right, Global.
because they're guilty, therefore we're innocent, we're the good guys, we have the moral high ground, even though we were able to
Oh yeah, Matt Saiga. I know, like it's still pretty well accepted in India, but there's been, tell me if I'm wrong, Matt Saiga. I've read that there's been sort of a pullback on that, or at least there's been some decline in the acceptance of it, mainly because of European impositions and things like that. But overall, it's still like much better than a lot of places. Uh, yeah, Robert, shame seems to be social in the sense that it seeks to mitigate action, but requires other people to enforce it. Guilt is personal in the sense that it seeks to punish action, and only requires knowledge of rules and laws. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, Robert. There's not much of an enforcement mechanism for guilt-based societies. Um, okay.
More quickly mobilized against Jimmy Kimmel's cancellation than a genocide.
As Commander-in-Chief, I will ensure America always has the strongest, most lethal fighting force in the world.
And when progressives do use shaming against the right, like publicly shaming male sexual abusers during the Me Too movement, they're seen as petty liars who are in turn sued for defamation. So even when the left uses the right's playbook against them, the conservatives are still able to twist the narrative and make themselves out as the victims. More recently, this happened with the Charlie Kirk assassination, where both sides of the political spectrum came together to mourn someone who spewed hate speech and made millions doing it. The Democrats never failed to rally and empathize with the right when the right would never do the same for them. For example, when Melissa and Mark Hortman, Democratic politicians from Minnesota, were murdered in their homes,
Alan.
flags weren't lowered, sports games weren't stopped, in memoriams by the White House were not held. So would publicly shaming politicians on the right, and also moderate Democrats, work
Robert.
as a progressive tactic when it just blows up in our face? I'm wary to think so, unfortunately, for a group of people so self-absorbed, and when it's been thrown back in liberal faces so many times in the past. Not to mention the right controls the largest military.
Shin, thank you for the comment, Shin. Shin, you're not the only person in here from India or who has roots in India, etc. But hello, Shin. Shin says, I'm Indian, and I would say that sexuality was not openly discussed before colonization, as in it wasn't outright condemned, but was not readily accepted either. Interesting, Shin. I don't think I know enough about the topic to verify or deny that, but that's a super interesting perspective. I will say, Shin, so maybe you know more about it than I do. Would you say though that like we don't talk, like the idea of like we don't talk about it is definitely a form of marginaliz um well, not marginalization. I mean, but like if you don't talk about it and it's sort of viewed as a normal thing, then that's sort of an acceptance of it. Maybe I don't know enough about it, Shin. I'm just kind of spitballing here. Maybe you can give me some insight. Um, it wasn't outright condemned, but was not readily accepted either. Interesting.
On the planet, and moderates ran on a campaign talking about having the most lethal fighting force in the world. It's hard to shame people who control an arsenal of guns. But is it worth trying despite the possible corrosive overreach that Taiwo wrote about? Perhaps. Maybe it won't dissuade people at the top 0.1%, who are so removed from society at large that they have no idea how much food costs. But shaming people who
Hillary Clinton
platform hate speech, who say and do provocative things either online or in real life just to stir things up and get clicks, like touting conspiracy theories or even shaming people or going no contact with people you know in your own life who hold and express bigoted beliefs, that could maybe dissuade them from voicing them out loud, at least, through people just not engaging with them anymore. Maybe it might help silence them. Though I will say in my own life, going no contact with people who are racist bigots doesn't really stop them from holding those beliefs, unfortunately. It's really hard to change people. But maybe we can change the culture. Taiwo opens his article with an anecdote about how in 1962, eminent philosopher Bertrand Russell received a series of letters from Sir Oswald Mosley, the founder of the British Union of Fascists, inviting him to a debate. Russell not only declined the invitation, but replied quite generally that nothing fruitful or sincere could ever emerge from association between us, since every ounce of my energy has been devoted to an active opposition to cruel bigotry, compulsive violence, and the sadistic persecution which has characterized the philosophy and practice of fascism. By simply not engaging with bigots and shaming them for their beliefs, perhaps even making them embarrassed, we could create new norms, where hate is not tolerated, respected, or legitimized, in the open at least. Maybe we should at least try. To paraphrase the article, shame is the bare minimum.
Yeah. So I will say, I like what she's saying here. It should be noted, and she's noted this, that even in like a shame-based society, shame and guilt are separate from the things you are like from the morals or values you are espousing. Okay, so even in like, yeah, maybe shame societies can be useful for enforcing things, but if there is an issue. But if there is an issue of like the people that the culture, the values of the culture are oppressive, and then that's being enforced by a shame society, It doesn't really matter, as in like it's not good. Okay, so uh, eh, just think about, folks, what the values are that, let's say we did have a shame society here in the USA. Do we think that our quote unquote cultural values are moral enough for that to be a good way of doing it? Maybe we'd have to change our values as well. Okay. Anyway,
I think a lot of people online, at least, are vocal about bringing back public shaming and have even turned it into a meme because of how polarized things are on the internet and in
I gotcha, Shin. Yeah, it falls under the category of shame society, even though people are more accepting now than back then. Majority of communities are not comfortable about it. Interesting, Shin. Interesting. Um, Matt Saga, there are several evidences in the forms of stories in art how same-sex relationships were quite prevalent, and might I say, except in India. So I disagree. Okay, I would have to look more into this, folks, because see, I was under the impression I originally, no offense to you, Shin, but I was under Matt Saigai's side of this. I remember reading about how like there was some belief among some people in India at some point. I can't remember the time period that, like, for example, someone that exhibits traits of two genders is closer to the gods because a lot of the gods are kind of, and if I'm wrong about this, please forgive me, are like multiple, don't really have a gender. Okay. And that there were a lot of depictions at the time of like same sex sexual activity and things like that. Um, Again, but there might be more to it than that. Um, there might be more to it than that, but just interesting to hear the different perspectives. I am not an expert on India, so I don't want. That's why I'm not taking a strong stand on it. But I will look into both of what you're saying here.
real life, where people just start grifting for money, and where it's right
Right,
there
Matt
for us to
Saigon.
see on our phones how so many people who are guilty are able to just go through life without facing any ramifications for their guilt, specifically white wealthy celebrities and politicians, and where we can see so many innocent people and the planet die in front of us at the hands of these white wealthy politicians and billionaires. Class inequality has never been so visible. We need to start shaming people again. And I think maybe perhaps in the US, not having public shaming is done by design. Not only because shame culture is viewed as backwards in the US as it's associated with non-white, i.e. non-civilized people, but because it's generally very uncomfortable to feel shame. And who wants to feel that?
Yeah.
To have this internal and external shame that you're not living up to your best self or not being virtuous leads people to dark places. But with guilt, you can find some way to fix that negative feeling through apologizing, proving your innocence, doing better, etc. Surrounding yourself with yes men. Guilt is somewhat easier to overcome, especially in the US where guilty people are made famous and popular and even voted into office. Again, perhaps this is by design because it lets people with power off the hook more easily, under the guise of a more civilized society. But as I quoted in the beginning, since the US has no conscience, how could we ever really even begin to feel guilt? Enter shame.
Yeah, and pizza, you're totally right. Like, and I will point out, pizza, you're right. Remember, folks, all societies use both guilt and shame. It's a matter of how much of each one do you use. And I agree, we need more shame in our society, right? As long as we're attaching the shamed virtue, like, to virtues that would are actually good virtues. You're totally right, pizza. And I mean, I totally agree with her. I was just kind of spitballing there.
Shaming. However, I remain somewhat, again, wary of bringing back public shaming under techno-fascism due to the panopticon of social media where marginalized people are more likely to be shamed and be recorded in their most vulnerable moments for clicks and views. Sarah Z already made a video about this that I'll put here. On the other hand, it is through this technology that we can possibly start shaming ICE officers, for example, even though their
Yeah.
faces are hidden. Perhaps we can use the tech the same way actual fascists do, by trying to shame them on large social media platforms. But also, isn't that what they want? And not only that, but even when one of them is murdered, they're then martyred. How is public online shaming a viable way to fight fascism when reposting and sharing images of state-sanctioned violence also helps uphold a culture of fear? Foucault wrote in Discipline and Punish that the aim of public punishment was to make an example, not only by making people aware that the slightest offense was likely to be punished, but by arousing feelings of terror by the spectacle of power letting its anger fall upon the guilty person. In criminal matters, the most difficult point is the imposition of the penalty. It is the aim and the end.
And that makes sense. That does make sense to me. That so you're saying that in like um in southern India, it's considered making you closer to God, not so much northern India. Does it have to do with some of the conquests that came into India? I'm just curious. Uh, some of the Islamic conquests, some of the Mongols, etc. I could be wrong. I literally am asking. I'm not sure. That's interesting.
End of the procedure, and it's only fruit by example and terror when it is well applied to the guilty person. When public shaming and punishment was first introduced, it was to uphold the status quo and satiate the masses, while also striking fear into them. But the progressive left want to use this tactic to try to shame those in power and turn the whole thing on its head. And I think in general it's a noble idea, because that is, again, the bare minimum we can do as civilians, is to shame those who uphold authoritarianism. Will bringing
Yeah,
back
I
public
agree.
shaming work on social media? I don't know. I did see recently that an ICE officer was relieved of his duties after shoving a woman to the ground in a public immigration court hearing, so perhaps there's hope, but it will take a real cultural shift and a political leftist shift in the Democratic Party to change things. I will say that dollars speak louder than words. The Starbucks boycott and the canceling of Disney Plus subscriptions did create a noticeable dent in these companies' bottom lines, that they changed back some policies. At
He's already been reinstated, Carlito. So of course, of course, of course, of
least with
course.
Disney Plus, and eventually caved to putting Jimmy Kimmel back on the air. Dollars and cents speak louder than guilt or shame in a capitalistic society.
Yeah, and that's the big again, folks. We can talk about guilt and shame a lot, but we also need to understand that the fundamental basis of a lot of these problems are material conditions. What we're talking about here is kind of theoretical. It's important, but a lot of these things, even if we adopt more shame, still won't work because the power is in the hands of a very small group of wealthy people and elites who control everything because of their wealth and power, and we have a corrupt political system. So maybe adopt more shame and make those fundamental material changes we need.
So maybe that's the most effective way, right now at least, that we as the masses can bring change about at the top.
Yes, I
As
love her.
Stokely Carmichael said, boycotts are the most passive thing we as people can do to make change, and it's worth doing.
So Dr. King and his associates got together and said, this is inhuman. We will boycott your bus system. Now understand what a boycott is. A boycott is a passive act. It is the most passive political act that anyone can commit, a boycott.
Yeah.
Because what the boycott was doing was simply saying, we will not ride your buses. No sort of antagonism. He was not even verbally violent. He was peaceful. Dr. King's policy was that nonviolence would achieve the gains for black people in the United States. His major assumption was that if you are nonviolent, if you suffer, your opponent will see your suffering and will be moved to change his heart. That's very good. He only made one fallacious assumption. In order for nonviolence to work, your opponent must have a conscience. The United States has none.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. All right, it's almost over here,
When I
folks.
told my
This is-
friend
this is
about
really
this video
good.
topic, they asked me, is canceling guilting or shaming? And in my eyes, at least, canceling is based on being found guilty of something and then the public shaming them for it. But if the accused doesn't feel guilty, what's there to be ashamed of? How can you possibly shame someone who feels no guilt or shame? Do you then have to use fear? Fear of being ostracized or embarrassed or excommunicated, fear of some sort of punishment in order to have real consequences. For example, we can have free speech, but not free of consequences. Sure, you can say something hateful and horrible, but that doesn't mean you can get away with it scot-free. I guess what I'm wondering here is that on the guilt, shame, fear spectrum, what would most likely lead to more progressive norms when it comes to delegitimizing hateful movements? Or would you just have to take down capitalism in order to not create incentives to stratify and segregate people in the first place? Take down the system that leads to hoarding wealth and power and that upholds social strata. These questions are not ones I have answers for personally, but I think they're worth exploring. So that's it for this one. I hope you liked it. These questions have been on my mind.
All right. All right. Thank you very much, because that was fascinating. Okay, folks. So now we have completed our examination of guilt and shame and how the United States needs some more shame going on. Okay. And we also still need those fundamental changes I've always talked about, those material changes, those political changes, because otherwise the shame won't really matter, will it? Okay. So, all right. Again, folks, if we get If we get, what, 2 more super chats, just 2, I will do a Jester After Dark, okay? For those that are watching now, let me do my little bit here, right here on the screen. Oh, wait, right there on the screen. If you wanna send me something through Buy Me a Coffee, that'll count towards our super chat goal. You can also send it through YouTube. If you're over on Twitch, please follow. If you subscribe to Twitch, that'll also count towards the super chat goal. And, oh, that's fair, Matt Saiga. Yeah, I didn't know. Interesting. I didn't know that, Matt Saiga. Okay, fascinating. Also, if you like my content, you can become a member on my YouTube channel for as little as 99 cents a month, and you get access to a cute little jester hat next to your name in chat, as well as a library of videos I'm creating of my past presentations. Yeah, that's true, Mithril. You're right. Boris Johnson has no shame whatsoever. And I will say, Mithril, the UK is viewed also as a guilt-based society. So please do those things, folks. Again, we just need 2 more super chats of $2 or more, and I will do the Jester After Dark live stream later tonight. Okay. All right. Okay. All right, guys. So there we go. Thank you, everyone, for listening here. Oh, I got you. That makes sense, Shin. Okay. This again, then you guys are educating me. I am not as deeply familiar with the history of that region because I grew up in an ethnocentric education system over here. Yeah. Well, Louise joined the club. So does the United States. No guilt or shame. Okay. All right. So, guys, I wanted to react to a few Discord videos. Um, uh, Okay. I'm going to be getting off here soon. As I said at the beginning of chat here, I'm going to be going to a little festival with my mother, so I'm not going to be streaming as long today. But let's take a look here at some of the things on Discord I could look at. Let me open up my Discord. And again, folks, just 2 more super chats. 2 more super chats are $10 more, and then I will do a second stream later tonight if we get there. Jester After Dark stream. Okay, come on, Discord. Pull up for me. Pull up. Okay. Let's take a look here. Okay. Reactions. Interesting. I like the frog. Be like frog. Okay. Oh, that looks like a good one, Robert. Might be too long though at this point. Is Clumsy Mumsy here? Is someone named Clumsy Mumsy here right now? Clumsy Mumsy? Clumsy Mumsy, is he here? That's you. Perfect, Louise. Okay, so let's watch Louise's. Thank you, Louise, for sending that. This is just a short.
I thought that as a Westerner and as a white person, I would have some degree of privilege if I ever found myself incarcerated by the Israelis. But to come.
Okay. So this is. Let me make sure my screen is up here so you can even see, you all can see what I'm doing. I don't think you can at the moment. Here we go. All right. So this is. How do we go here? Live streaming, activism. Okay, so this is titled. What is it titled? Activist from Sumud Flotilla. Okay. Call Israeli forces inhumane, citing abuse of elderly detainees. Okay. All right, so let's watch this. Again, since it's on Instagram, I have to. I'm gonna just have to Oh wait, no, I can go back to the beginning. Excellent. Okay, so let's watch this. I have not seen it. Thank you very much for sending it, Louise. Let's take a look again, folks. Just 2 more super chats. Because I kind of want to live stream later. Okay, I'm not trying to beg, but okay. Anyway, let's continue. Let's watch this.
I thought that as a Westerner and as a white person, I would have some degree of privilege if I ever found myself incarcerated by the Israelis. But to come face to face with the level of sadism and inhumanity that they display was really quite shocking to me.
Oh.
And one of our comrades, I don't think he'd mind me saying, a 75-year-old man trying to bring baby formula to a besieged population, was taken out of his prison cell at 2 o'clock in the morning, guns pointed at his head, and all he was asking for was his insulin. They wouldn't give the man insulin for
Jesus.
3 or 4 days. They were, in my opinion,
I mean, is anyone really surprised by this? I mean, the Israeli government is a fascist regime that is extremely inhumane. Yeah, if you're brown, they'll probably treat you worse, but they're not going to treat white Westerners good either. Are you kidding me? You're not Israeli, are you? Right? I mean, okay. Pizza, good. Thank you, pizza. That'll count as one pizza. That'll count as one. Okay, thank you. We just need one more, folks. Okay, thank you, pizza. All right. Yeah, I mean, of course they do. They're monsters. That's despicable what he's talking about that they
they were
did.
very happy to let him die. It's not
Of
even
course.
a patch on what Palestinians are going through, but that was on my mind the whole time. I was thinking, if they're treating me like this with the passport I have and the privilege I have, imagine what they're doing to Palestinians in prisons, many of whom are children. I thought
Really, Alan? Well, that's a perfect thing to bring. Pizza, thank you. Okay, folks, I will do the second stream later. Thank you very much, Pizza, for those stickers there. I'll count both of those. Thank you, Pizza. Okay, Alan. They also singled out Jewish Americans on the flotilla and publicly shamed them. Of course they did. Of course it did. Thank you, pizza. Okay. No, thank you, pizza, because you're the one that provided this. Okay. Okay. This is, yeah, Alan. I mean, of course they did, right? They publicly shamed the Jewish Americans. Yeah, because again, folks, it's not really about Judaism. It's about a fascist regime, right? Yeah, even Jews will be targeted if they want to. Um, I mean, it's just like, you're the best there. Look how popular you are now, pizza. Okay, I mean pizza's always popular. Who doesn't like pizza, right? But okay, and I mean that in more ways than one. Okay, well, let's continue watching this. I mean, well, I think it just ended, but like, I mean, like this video is like, oh, it's a Tuesday in Israel, right? Like, I know I'm not saying that as a bad thing, Louise. Like, I'm just saying, like, of course, this is what Israel does, right? They're monsters. Okay, they're complete monsters. Not surprised at all. And that's very reflective of their very fascist society right now. Um, Now, Matt Saiga, I didn't say you weren't. I just said that pizza right now is very popular. Okay. Okay. Thank you for that, Louise. That was great. I hadn't seen that. What is this? What is this guy? Oh, he's Irish. Okay, I guess I should have guessed by the accent. That's fascinating. Thank you, Louise, for that video. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thank you, Mithro. Yeah, don't forget, folks, that the IDF is the most moral army in the world. The most moral army in the world, right? Obviously, right? That's just a fact. Okay, obviously, complete and utter bullshit. Complete and utter bullshit. Um, I don't even think it's right to say any army is moral. I think the nature of an army is that it is the force that can do the immoral things. But it's a particularly horrific army. Okay. Okay. Matt's like using the Trump emoji there. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So thank you for that, Louise. Let's do I'll do one more short one, and then I'm gonna get off to go to that little thing. Let's watch. This was sent by Meowzord. I don't think Meowzord's here, but we'll watch it.
Inflatable
It's just a
frog
short.
costume at a protest.
Okay, so this is called inflate I like the frog, be like frog. I don't know what the hell this is gonna be about, but we'll end on this one here. Okay. Let's watch it.
Is good and smart and an intelligent strategy that can and should be replicated by some but not all people, because it's not the only strategy. Does that work for you, Twitter? Does that work for you,
What
$8
strategy?
losers who pay the richest man in the world to post to a free website that has turned into a Nazi
I
bar
don't.
where
I don't. What is the inflatable frog? Uh I don't what is the inflatable frog costume? Am I missing out on something? I'll look it up. Um, inflatable frog costume. Oh, this guy? I've seen this guy. I've seen this before. I don't remember what the context. This right here. Oh, he's a protester. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, he's a that is hilarious. Uh, let me just see what it's about before I watch this. Protest versus MAGA media influencers. Um, that's really interesting. That's a good, interesting form of protest. Dismantles their narrative a bit. Oh, because you can't take them. That's brilliant. Okay, that is brilliant. Okay. Uh, yeah, that is brilliant. Yeah, just use absurdism, right? Carlitos Pizza. He's famous now. They've got them on T-shirts and everything. Alan, protesters. Okay. This is how you beat fascism. I totally agree. You need to make fun of the fascists, humiliate them, and leftists were fighting about it. Of course they were, Alan. You always got the. Why not try every method, right? Okay. All right. Let me. So now I understand it. I'll watch the rest of this clip. Be like the frog. Be like
Where
frog.
you open it up every single fucking day and all it does
Hey,
is tell you that
Maxine.
everything is lost and that there's no hope. You morons. Oh no, oh look at them. They're all the ICE guys are dressed up like army dudes and our guys look like clowns. Yeah.
That's the
They're
point.
expecting us to dress like army dudes. So then they can claim it's an insurrection. They're expecting people to show up and look menacing. But when you show up in an inflatable frog costume or a unicorn or a literal clown makeup, yeah, they're not dangerous. We're not Joker clowns. We're birthday clowns. Because people have birthdays in Portland. We're
Are you
talking about
serious,
areas
Robert?
that are smaller than like 2 or 3 city blocks that they're trying to loop in whole counties of people to put underneath martial law. And you idiots on Twitter are out here tweeting, "Oh, we should be doing more
That's
stuff."
amazing,
No,
Carlitos.
first thing, you don't live there. Second thing, I don't even believe you're in America. Many of you aren't even in America. There are so many ops that are happening across all these fucking apps of trying
Yeah,
to
I
get
love
people
it.
to do things. Why do you think he keeps yelling at people that, oh, if you burn the flag, he wants you to burn flags. So that way he can put imagery on Facebook to keep scaring pup-ups into
I
stay in the
love this
fucking
tactic.
lane. Those dudes are activating slowly. We're slowly activating everybody to realize,
I'm going to be going to the No Kings protest on the 18th of October, and I was considering wearing a full jester outfit to it. What do you all think about that? Maybe we'll talk about that some other time. Just do you think that, because this is kind of reinforcing that for me. Anyway.
oh, wow, maybe pulling moms out of their cars and beating them in front of schools doesn't bring down grocery prices. Oh, look at that. Maybe spending $100 million on tanks so that way they can block traffic whenever the fuck they want isn't bringing down home prices. Oh, look at that. Maybe rounding up 2 million people is only helping BlackRock's stock price and not my own fucking 401k. That we're greedy, separated, split peoples across this entire fucking nation. Okay?
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, your name is cut off here. Jam. All I can see is JAM. Jamil. I'm not sorry, it gets cut off. But thank you very much for the super chat there. Um, yeah, this individual, Jamil. Love all your videos. This is my first stream. I'm an engineering student and listen to your videos every day to and from classes. Thank you so much, Jamil. I'm really glad to see you here, Jamil. Feel free. I mean, yeah, feel free to watch them afterwards, but also feel free to stop by and such. Yeah, welcome aboard there, Jamil. Love to have you here. Thank you very much for that generous donation you just sent in. Okay. Um, and Jamil, you should join our Discord because we have a really fast growing community on there. We talk about things like this on a lot. By the way, for the folks that are out there, by the way, the folks that are out there, we pinned at the top of the YouTube chat is a link to our Discord page. I'm going to just pin it in the chat. I recommend everyone join our Discord. We have a really great community there. I'm not just saying that. Like, I'm not trying to be self-aggrandizing by saying that. I think people that are in the community know, like, we have great conversations, debates. People are very respectful. And if you go to our Discord page, you can actually put things in the reaction channel that I'll react to on stream. And okay, let me. Okay, so I'm gonna just post this here. Here is the yeah, no kings, just jesters. Clowning is a civil duty. I totally agree. Okay, there it is. So I recommend people who are here who are not part of our Discord just join it. Okay. And let me. How dare you, Matt Saigai? Okay. More of that guilt culture going on with me, Matt Saigai. Okay. So let me. I'm gonna ask in the chat here. Do you think I should wear a full jester outfit to the protests? And I might, even if you guys all say yes, I'm going to do some more research on it to see if it's a wise move, especially if I'm going to be going as a semi-journalist because I'm going to be live streaming from it. But costume to the protest. Okay. Start the poll. Hello, Fatih MacPop. Can you reaction We Go Up by Baby? Yes. So Fatima, I'm sorry, I just realized Fatima K-pop. Yes, we can. But we're gonna do that in the second stream later tonight when I'll do some music reaction. So if you stop by then, you can put it into the chat and I will react to it. Okay. All right, guys, let me finish this video and then I'm gonna have to go.
This entire
Okay,
nation and
100%
world.
yes. Okay.
So when I see somebody in an inflatable green frog costume and I see federal agents who are being paid with my tax dollars use too much force against someone fucking standing there, yeah, that radicalizes me a little bit more. That also radicalizes normies. You know, the people you claim your revolution is here to help. Inflatable frog costume at a protest is good and smart and an intelligent strategy that can and should be replicated by
Yes,
some, but not
Louise,
all
it'll be
people
later.
because it's not the only strategy.
Okay, that was great. Thank you for that video, Mauser. I don't think you're there. Yes, so folks, I'm gonna get off now because I can tell I need to go hang out with my mom a bit. I'm gonna put my face back up here. All right. I will come back on later, folks. It'll probably be sometime between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I know some of you may be asleep at that point, but I'll come back on later then. All right, let me do my last little bit here, folks. Thank you everyone who donated, etc. And please stay tuned. And when I do come back on later, it'll just be on Twitch because I can't show songs on YouTube. So if you're in the Discord, I will be I will post it in there. Just go over to the Twitch, okay? Yesterday there was the YouTube stream popped up accidentally, and I think a lot of people were in there. My apologies. I don't know why that happened, but so I'll just be streaming on Twitch if I do it later. Okay. Much love to you too, Shin. Much love to you too. Okay. Yeah. God help you all over there with Modi. I'm just gonna say it, Shin, because we got Trump here, which is worse in some ways, but Modi not great either. So I'm definitely feeling for my friends over there in India. Okay. All right, folks. Let's do it, shall we? Let's do it. All right, let's do it. You all know what I'm about to say. Okay. Everyone ready? First and foremost, folks, free Palestine. Free Palestine. Second of all, never stop resisting. The easiest way to resist is to think for yourselves. The easiest way to resist is to think for yourselves, and that includes when you watch me. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. See what other people are saying. Don't get caught in an information silo because the easiest way to resist is to think for yourselves. Okay. Thirdly, we're living in a fascist moment in this country, not only in this country, but in other countries around the world. Okay. Fascism thrives in an environment where people have lost faith in their democratic institutions, so they turn towards more radical means to fix it. In order to fix fascism, slow it down or stop it, you need major reforms. We need major reforms in this country, not only in this country, but in the UK, elsewhere in the world, in India. We need major reforms. You cannot stand in the center. If you stand in the center, the fascists will walk all over you like you're a slug on the ground. We need major reforms, and we need to go a bit to the left. I'm not asking for anything crazy. We do need to go a bit to the left, though. We need to make sure people have what they have. have what they need to survive, healthcare, things like that, they'll be less likely to turn to fascism. We need major reforms in this country. Lastly, on the wall behind me is a sword. The name of that sword is Chainbreaker. Uh, Chainbreaker has been passed down in my family for many years. It is thought to have been responsible for the death of 7 slave owners. Why do I have it back there? I have it back there to remind everyone that our ancestors have made some major sacrifices for some of the things we have today, including oftentimes putting their lives on the line to get us some of those things. Some of those things are being rolled back as we speak. We cannot let those things go to waste, their sacrifice go to waste, folks. Please, please, please do not let their sacrifice go to waste, and always, always, always fight for a better future. And on that, folks, you have a good day, morning, evening, afternoon, night, day, wherever you may be in the world. Okay, I'm about to go to a little Japanese festival. I'm excited for it. I'll come back on later for anyone who's interested. And you all have a good rest of your day.